Welcome to this YSL Report Builder tutorial. In this video we'll look at how to generate alternating row colours for the detail rows in a table. We'll start by calculating the number of each row using the RowNumber function, and then look at how to use the mod operator to work out whether the row is odd or even, and using the result of that we'll create a conditional format to create the alternating row colours. The second half of the video looks at how to do essentially the exact same thing, but when your table contains groups. So we'll look at calculating the row number in grouped tables, and importantly, how you can change the scope of the RowNumber function so that it resets the row numbering for each new group created. So let's get started. Here's a quick example of the type of thing we'll create in this video. Of course, you're welcome to choose a much nicer colour scheme than the one I have, but the important thing is that the detail rows in this table use alternating background colours. We're not limited just to background colours, by the way. We can also modify font formatting properties in an alternating fashion, but background colour is the one that makes it stand out the most. So we'll start with an example for a simple table like this, and then a little later on in the video we'll look at how to do the same thing when your table has groups in it. So we'll set alternating background colours for the detail rows, and the important thing here is to ensure that each group's first row has the same background colour. In order to follow along with the video, you will need a copy of the YSL Movies database, and just in case you don't already have that installed, you can use this video which explains how to get it set up, and there's a link in that video's description which explains which you can use to download any files that you'll need. Assuming you've done that part already, I'm going to head over to Report Builder where I've got a blank report waiting for me, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a data source which connects to the YSL Movies database. So I can right click the data sources folder, choose add data source, I'll change its name so that it's called movies, choose to use an embedded connection, make sure that I'm pointing to a Microsoft SQL server rather than an analysis services server, and then click the build button on the right hand side to help me construct my connection string. The server name I'm going to type in a shortcut to my local host, so // followed by the name of the instance of SQL Server I'm using, which in my case is SQL 2017. And then from the drop down list a little further down the dialog box, I can select my movies database, then click OK a couple of times to create my data source. Next I can create my data set, and I'll do that by right clicking on the movies data source and choose add data set. And then I'll call this one Films, and then I'll click the Query Designer button down at the bottom of the dialog box so I can get a bit of help constructing my select statement. I don't need too many fields for this particular dataset, but I'll expand the Tables folder first, and then the Film table, and from here I'm going to pick the title and the Oscar wins columns. And then from the Genre table I'm going to pick both columns, Genre ID and Genre. We'll use this for grouping our table a little later on. So I'm just going to tick the box next to the genre table to select everything from it. I want to apply a filter so that I only see Oscar winning films in this dataset. So I'm going to click the Apply Filters button or Add Filters button, and then change the field name from Title to Oscar Wins. The operator to is more than or equal to, and then type in a value of 1. Then I can click OK a couple of times, and that will generate my dataset. Next, I'll create a basic table to display the results of that dataset. I'll start by tidying up the report, so I'll remove this placeholder title text box, and then right click into the page footer and choose to remove that as well. Then I can right click into the report body and choose Insert Table. I'll just assign two fields. I'll assign the title and the Oscar wins fields to the first two columns of the table. Change the width of the title column. I'm going to do a bit of basic formatting for the font first of all, just to avoid this font rendering bug where often when you run a report you don't see all of the text in the table you've just created. In fact, I'm seeing none of it in this particular case. So a quick way to solve that is to highlight all the cells in the table and then switch from the default font to any other font, and then just back to the default font of Arial, and then that will solve the problem of the font being rendered properly. Annoying, but there we go. A little tiny bit of extra tidying up. I'm going to change the header cell background colour. So I'm going to select the entire header row, change the background colour, and then maybe change the font colour as well. Okay, so there's the very basic table that we'll use to demonstrate the alternating row colours. The key to making this technique work is to be able to determine whether a row in the details section of the table is an odd numbered row or an even numbered row. And in order to do that in the first place, we have to know what the row number of each row in the table is. Fortunately, Report Builder has a built-in function which allows you to calculate the row number. It's got a really clever name, it's called RowNumber. So to demonstrate how that works, we're just going to create an ad hoc expression which will show us the row number for each row in this third column of the table. Let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to right-click into this empty text box in the details row and choose to launch the expression builder by clicking expression. You can find the row number function in the common functions category and then in the miscellaneous subsection. And there's the row number function. If you select it, it tells you what the function actually returns. Row number is a little bit of a misleading name for the function. It's not technically calculating the physical row number in the table. It's maintaining a running count of all the rows in something called the specified scope. So if I double click to insert the row number function, and it will open up the round brackets for me there as well, I have to then specify which scope I want the row number function to calculate the running count of. If you don't want to have to specify an exact specific scope, and in this case I don't, the simplest thing to do here is just pass in a value of nothing, almost the equivalent of null if you know SQL terms. So row number nothing, and then close the round brackets, and that's the entire expression. So if I click OK at that point and then run the report, we'll see this extra column simply counts, starting at 1 of course, and increasing by 1 for each new row that it encounters. The next step is to determine whether the row number is odd or even. And one way to do that is to take the row number, divide it by 2 and find the remainder of that division. So if I said 1 divided by 2, the remainder would be 1. 2 divided by 2, the remainder would be 0. 3 divided by 2, the remainder would be 1. 4 divided by 2, the remainder would be 0, and so on. So if we work out the remainder, we'll get an alternating set of 1s and 0s according to whether the row is odd or even. To do that, let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to right-click into the text box in which I've just created the row number expression and choose expression again. The operator which returns the remainder of a division in Visual Basic or in Report Builder is called mod. And if you're not sure about that, you can find the operators category here and then find the arithmetic section, and you'll find the mod operator sitting there. And you'll see the description says it returns, divides two numbers and returns the remainder. So row number nothing, mod 2, and the entire expression now looks like this. If we can then click OK, and then run the report again, now you'll see the row number has changed to an alternating set of 1s and 0s. Now we can simply create a conditional format which tests if the result of this expression we've just created is 1 or 0 and apply the appropriate background colour. To do that, let's head back to the design view, and I want to format every single cell in the details row. So it's probably useful at this point to head to the View tab in the ribbon and choose to display the Properties window by ticking the box next to the Properties option if that isn't already done. I can then select the entire details row in the table, and then in the Properties window find the Background Colour property, click on the drop-down arrow next to where it says No Colour, and then choose Expression. I'll just take away whatever's currently sitting in that dialog box, so I'll highlight and then delete that. And then I want to start by adding an if function. So I could either type that in myself or head to the common functions category, find the program flow section, and then double click the if function. The thing I'm trying to check is if the result of the expression we've just created is equal to 0 or equal to 1, depending on your preference. So what I'm going to do is head down to the miscellaneous section and then double click the row number function. Then I can type in nothing and close a set of round brackets for the row number function. Then a space and type in the word mod, and then another space and the number 2. So that's the expression we just created, row number nothing mod 2. That's what creates either 1 or 0. And then I can check whether the result of that is equal to 0. So that's my logical test for the if function. What I can then do is type in a comma and then choose which colour I want the row to be if it is an even numbered row. So if we're checking for zeros, that will determine even numbered rows. To pick a colour, the simplest thing to do is head back to the Constants category in the expression builder, and then you can either just click on a colour in the grid here, or you can choose more colours and pick from a slightly wider selection. I'll keep things simple here. I'm going to go with I'll go with light blue, I think, for my first example. Then I'll type in a comma, and I have to choose what colour the odd numbered rows should be as well. So for those, I'm just going to go with the bog standard, the default no colour or transparent as it's written in. I'll just close the round brackets at that point, and that's the entire expression that will be used to generate the background colour. Having done that, we can click OK, run the report by heading back to the Home tab and clicking Run, and now we've got our odd and even numbered rows coloured in differently. If you've watched the previous video on basic conditional formatting, you'll be aware that the background colour is just one of many properties you can set using an expression. Just to demonstrate a quick extra example, let's change the font colour based on whether the row number is odd or even as well. To do that, I'm going to head back to the design view, and I'm going to highlight the entire details row in the table. The basic expression I want to create is essentially the same as that we've just used for the background colour. So to save a bit of time, it's probably worthwhile selecting the background colour property, highlighting all of the text in that property, and then copying it to the clipboard. I'm going to do that by pressing Ctrl and C on my keyboard. Then I could find the font colour property, and then click on the drop down arrow next to where it says black, and then click expression. I can then simply paste in the expression I've copied in place of the default value in there. Now, of course, I don't want to generate the same font colour as I want to generate for the background colour. That would make the whole thing entirely unreadable. So what I'm going to do is take away the light blue and the double quotes. To remove that, make sure the text cursor is positioned in between the two commas that remain, and then pick a different colour. So let's go with a really dark blue font colour for the even numbered rows. And then I definitely don't want to generate a transparent font colour. In fact, that's not allowed. If you try to generate a transparent font colour, you'd find the report won't run at all. So I'm going to take away transparent, and then let's go with a dark grey font colour for the odd numbered rows. So the entire expression looks essentially the same as we've just created for the background colour, just with different colours for the font. Having done that, we can click OK and then run the report again, and we'll see slightly different font colours now. I'm not sure that's made it any more readable than it was previously, but of course you can play around with these settings to create something a little more tasteful than I've created here. The last thing I would probably do here for this example, there's absolutely no need to display the row number and the odd or even numbered rows in a separate column. So back into the design view, I would probably be tempted to delete that column entirely, and then when you run the report, you've just got the end result of the formatting. Next, let's see how this same technique works for a table which contains groups. Just as a quick reminder of the type of thing we'd like to create, I want to show a list of all the films, so we'll still see the detail rows, but this time they'll be organised into groups based on the genre that the film belongs to. So to do that, let's head back to the design view of the report. I'm going to move my existing table down the page somewhat, so I've got a bit of space to add in my new table. I'll right-click, Insert Table. I'll pick the same two fields for the first two columns, so I'll put in the title and the Oscar wins fields. I will then make sure that I'm going to be able to see all the text when I run the report, so I'll highlight all the cells in the table and change from the default font and then back to the default font. Then I'd like to create a group so that each film is arranged in the group for its genre. I can do this in several ways, but I'm going to pick the details item in the row groups panel at the bottom of the screen. I'll right click, choose add group, parent group, and then I'm going to choose to group on the genre ID. The ID is potentially more efficient than grouping on the text description of the genre. So if you have lots of data, you may find better performance using primary key ID values to perform your grouping rather than the long text description. I'll add a header and a footer to the group as well, and then click OK. And then I want to rearrange the table quite a bit. I want to get the genre name sitting across the top of each subsection. So I'm going to delete the column that's just been created for me. So I'll right click at the top and choose delete columns. I then want to insert a new row inside the group header. So currently I've got one row in the group header, one row in the details section, one row in the group footer. If I right click on the row that is in the group header, I want to choose to insert a row inside the group above. So that, you can hopefully see, extends the bracket symbol there. So I've got now 2 rows in the group header. I want to merge the 3 cells in the top of the group. So I'm going to select those and click the Merge button on the Home tab of the ribbon. Then I can choose to display the genre name in that cell. So I can do that by using the Field Selector button. I'm then just going to copy my 2 column headers from the very top row of the table. I'll select those 2 cells and press Ctrl and C to copy. And then I'm going to paste them in just below my genre header. So I'll press Ctrl and V to do that. Then I can delete that top row, do some basic formatting to make things look a little more interesting. So I'll change the background color and font color of the main header row, and then change the background color and the font color of the subheaders. And then I'd like to add a total Oscar wins value to the bottom of the group. So to do that, I can click on the Field Selector button at the bottom of the Oscar wins column. And as soon as I do that, it applies a sum function for me automatically, which is what I want, so that's good. Another little bit of basic formatting just to make this consistent. I'll type in the word total into that cell next door to the sum of Oscar wins. And nearly there. One last tiny bit of formatting to make it look hopefully reasonably neat. And then just to take away the border around that bottom right hand corner cell. Okay, so lots of effort to create that in the first place, but let's have a quick look if we run the report. Hopefully it looks reasonably sensible. 2 last little things I'd like to change. I want to sort the genres so they're sorted alphabetically by name, and then I want to insert a blank row in between each group. So back into the design view. If I select the grouped table, to insert a new row at the bottom is nice and straightforward. I can right click on the footer row, insert row inside group below. I'll then just take away the background color for those cells in that row. And I'll also remove the borders from cells in that row. To change the sorting, I need to go to the groups that I've created. So I'm going to right click on the genre ID group, choose group properties, choose sorting, and then change the sort order so that it's sorted alphabetically by genre, not genre ID. And finally, when I run the report, there's our basic grouped table. Next, I'd like to do what we did with the original table and calculate the row number for each detail row in the 3rd column of the table. So let's head back to the design view, and we can right click on the relevant row, so the detail row, the 3rd column, right click and choose expression. If I go to the common functions category and then go to miscellaneous, I can double click the row number function, type in nothing, close the round brackets, and then that's the entire expression. If I then click OK and run the report, we'll see, hopefully as you'd expect, a row number sitting next to each detail row. It's important to note that the row number counting picks up at the start of the next section, so you'll notice that it doesn't include the footer rows and the header rows in a group. The row number function isn't, as I said earlier, calculating the physical row number in the table. It's keeping a running count of the number of rows in a particular data scope. So this is fine, where we can use this. We could then take the mod 2 to work out whether the row is odd or even, and then change the background color accordingly based on an if function. But one thing to be careful of when you're doing things like this is, what if you wanted the first row of each group to be the same color? So this will work quite happily for action and adventure films. The first row number is an odd number, so 1 and 7. If we scroll down further, animation is also beginning with an odd number, 27. But when we get to the biography group, because the number of rows in the animation group is odd, then it changes the starting row number of the biography group to an even number. So if we use the exact same expression as we used earlier, we'd find that the first row in the biography group would be a different colour to the first row in the animation and adventure and action groups. That may well be fine. It doesn't really matter too much unless it's something that's going to bother you, in which case I'd like to make sure that every single group starts with an odd numbered row, starts with the number 1. To change the way the RowNumber function works, we can modify the scope parameter to tell it to count the rows or keep a running count of the rows within each genre group, so it will automatically reset to 1 at the beginning of each new group. To do that, let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to select the cell containing that expression first. The name of a scope can be a variety of different things. We've got some later videos in this playlist which explain how scope works in a bit more detail. For our example, we just need to know that the name of the scope we want to calculate the row number of is called genre ID. So the name of the scope is basically the name of the group that was created when you first added the parent group. If that's not a particularly descriptive name, you can change it. I could right-click on the genre ID group and choose Group Properties, and then modify the name there. But I'm happy with the genre ID group name. It kind of tells me what it's doing, so I'll cancel out of that to avoid changing it. Let's right-click on the cell which contains the expression for row number then, and choose Expression. And then inside the round brackets, rather than having the value of nothing, we want to write in the name of the scope inside a set of double quotes. So we have to pass this in as a string, so genre ID, and then close the double quotes. Be careful about the casing as well. You'll find certain expressions in Report Builder are case sensitive, and it tends to be that the names of scopes tend to be case sensitive, so make sure you match the case. Having done that, if I click OK and then run the report, we'll find this time the row number resets itself to 1 at the beginning of each group. So we now know that the first row in each group is an odd numbered row, and that will allow us to get some consistency in the background colours. So all we need to do now is generate our conditional format using the row number within the genre ID scope. So let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to highlight all the cells in the detail row again, head over to the properties window and find the background colour property. Click the drop down arrow next to where it says no colour and then choose expression. I'll remove whatever's in there already, no colour, and then head to the common functions category first, go to the program flow section, double click the if function, head to the miscellaneous section, double click the row number function, type in the name of my scope in a set of double quotes, genre ID, being careful to match the case, close a set of round brackets, type in mod 2 and check if the result of that expression is equal to 0. So it's the same basic logic we were checking earlier on. If dividing the row number by 2 returns 0, then we know it's an even numbered row. So I can then type in a comma, head back to the constant category and pick a background colour for those rows. I'll go with a light grey colour this time. I'll type in another comma, I'll pick the colour for the odd numbered rows, I'll go for no colour or transparent as it's written, close the round brackets, the entire expression looks like this, and having done that we can click OK, run the report, and we end up with a table where the first row in each group is a transparent row and subsequently the even numbered rows are grey. A final bit of tidying up just to remove that last column, and then we're basically done. So of course you can play around with the formatting properties there. You can choose much nicer colours than I have, of course. I'm sure you're far better at that than I am. But hopefully you found that technique useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.